I'm so happy to be here with Gina Francis of Temple Rebel Rose Radio, an all-round Rebel Rose. And those two words are enough to make me feel already very aligned with your work in the world. It feels like, yeah, I've been following you for a while on the socials, and yeah, just really love and enjoy everything that you put out into the world. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate that. And I feel you. And it's really lovely to be here. And I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we were just talking before I hit record. Where I first came across your work was through a mutual friend and mentor of ours, Victoria Washington. And I listened to you you interviewed her for a podcast. And what struck me straight away about you is because I'm a huge Victoria Washington fan. So I've listened to a lot of different podcasts that she has done, and different people interview her. But straight away, and I didn't know you at all or your work at that point, I noticed that you weren't afraid to ask the big questions. Like, it really immediately hit me like, oh, this woman's really ready to go deep. Like, she's not gonna skim around on the edges, she's just gonna go straight in. And I love that. So I wonder if that might be an interesting place for us to start. Has it been a lifetime of diving deep and not skirting around the edges?
I love this so much. And both yes and no. I think from a very young age, I always was deep and went deep and wanted to go deep. And then pretty soon I was taught that that wasn't okay, and that I couldn't go to those places. It wasn't safe. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't supported. It wasn't celebrated. So I think that was really part of, as many women, specifically with our voice, that journey of not asking the big questions, that journey of not going to those uncomfortable places and saying the things we want to say, that was really quickly shut down for me. And I feel as when I really stepped into this work with the womb and the menstrual cycle and like going deep in these feminine, like this women's wisdom ways, I really started to like reclaim that part of myself. And it still is an unfolding journey with the voice, and that going into those places of discomfort. And for me specifically, I really feel like my cycle, my period, my womb, like that maturing journey for me as a woman is what's encouraged me to like go back to those deeper places and to allow that to be safe again to do. Because whether they're the conversations about money, like in that podcast episode with Victoria, or the conversations about our blood or about birth or about the menstrual cycle, sex, pleasure, sensuality, all of those things, like they're important conversations that really get to be had, and they're just not had enough. So we really need the people who are willing to go those places, and I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, I mean, it comes through so clearly in your work. Was there a particular moment that you have an awareness of where you felt the calling to kind of be that braver person, to kind of step into that courage, or the capacity of having more difficult conversations and going deeper within yourself? Or do you think it was more of a gradual evolution? Like, were there turning points, or did it just kind of slowly evolve that you became more deeply immersed in this work?
I think it was more gradual. There were definitely significant pieces along the journey. For example, when I brought my period back after not having it for over a year, really for many years, after being on hormonal birth control, experiencing eating disorders, orthorexia, over exercising, like that whole realm of things. And then bringing my period back naturally after that journey was definitely a turning point. One of my first really big relationships with an ex was a massive turning point for me. And the ending of that relationship was a huge turning point for me in like going to those deeper places and bringing voice to those deeper places within myself. I mean, there's so many different pieces, I think, and I honestly feel like one of the biggest threads for me around that, because I think it really is a maturing journey, and it's like one I'm still on, you know what I mean? Like it's still a daily devotion and a growth. And I think being continually surrounded by other women and sisterhood communities, both, you know, like my friends just near and dear to me in my life, women that I've met online through Instagram, through masterminds, through courses, through just like digital online spaces, have been so paramount to that journey for me, because I don't know if I would be speaking about the things that I am and being like so willing to go to those places if I hadn't been surrounded by other women who have also been willing to do that and been willing to support and guide and lead, and like for all of us to get to lean on each other. So I really feel, I kind of forget your initial question, but I feel like having that community of women around me in different capacities has been so, so, so important. And I feel like that's something you understand as well.
Oh, completely. I really do. And I think this is one of the magical things about social media and the internet. And we kind of love to hate social media. I know I do, but it does open up communities that we would otherwise just not have access to. And it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And actually, as you were speaking, I was thinking, because I was asking you, were there like specific turning points in your journey? But I was actually thinking as you were speaking, when any of our journey and our growth is connected to moon cycle, of course it's going to happen over time, because the cycle happens over time. Like there's no
Yes.
pivotal moment in the moon cycle. Like it's just cyclical. It keeps coming around and spinning around, and we're there to observe and hold space. And so there is
I
this
love that.
beautiful progression. And I think particularly, you're describing a journey of having not had a bleed for a long period of time, and then for that to come back, it's an incremental process. Like it doesn't just happen in a heartbeat. It happens through a journey. Would you say that's a fair reflection?
Oh my gosh, completely. I'm having like full body goosebumps all over me, because I really deeply resonate with that. And I feel like in our world, like we really want this one big thing that's going to like fix all of our problems. We want the one thing that's going to make changes. We want to know like the one turning point on people's journeys. And of course, there's always going to be those bigger pivotal moments in everyone's life. Like there always is going to be. But to like pin that down to one thing that changed everything can often dilute like all of those really subtle changes. And just like you said with the moon cycle, it's like the moon is literally just like we're changing our view of her every single day. The same within our bodies, we're changing our view and experience of ourselves every single day in our bodies, sometimes more subtle, sometimes more like overtly expressed, like when the moon is full, just like it is, right now while we're recording this. It's like we can really see it. And oftentimes those are like the bigger, bolder, brighter things that happen. But then what about what happens under the dark moon? What about what happens in those other subtleties and crevices and like quieter spaces that maybe the world doesn't see? Like, I think that's where so much of the magic is. And then that like more outward change or like pivotal moment journey is like almost is a reflection of all of those other little ones.
Yeah, I love that reflection on the idea of the kind of the light and the dark, really, like the shadow, and then the more expressive or expansive side of ourselves. And I know that one of the things that you are a real leader in is womb-led business. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the idea of connecting the way that we run our businesses or the way that we show up in leadership with this energy of the cycle, like rather than what capitalism teaches us, which is just grow, 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 expand, bigger, bigger, bigger all the time. I think, for me, a real anchor point for divine feminine in business or womb-led business is that it isn't just one straight line. It is cyclical in its nature. What does that look like for you in your work and your business and your teaching?
Yeah. So I immediately think of nature. Like right now, I'm sitting here in Bali and I'm just looking out the windows at the abundance of nature. And I always turn to nature for everything with all these teachings, especially within relation to like us and our business and our work, our creativity, our leadership, because all of it is a reflection of nature. We as humans are a part of nature. We're no separate than it. And we see outside, no matter where we live in the world, there are some sort of seasons, even if they're more subtle, like in a tropical place like Bali, there's not an overt like snowing winter and sunny summer, but we nature moves through her own cycles, the birth and death cycle of a plant, of the flowers that grow on the tree and then fall off, of the vegetables that we grow, the greens that we grow, of the seasons, like I mentioned before, moving through, the darkness and the quiet and the cold of winter through, to that rebirth of spring and that like outward energy of summer. Nature moves through all those cycles and we are no different. And when we try and operate in our work, our business, our leadership, in any way that's different than that, we're going to very quickly come up against some walls, come up against some ultimately like burnout, because, there's that quote, I forget who says it, but it's like most people would know it, that like nature does not rush, but everything gets done kind of a thing. And it's like nature doesn't rush its cycles. It just trusts and moves. And like the whole ecosystem, all the moving pieces are harmonious and move together and adapt and change and die and rebirth and fertilize each other. And I feel like it's the same within the way that we work. And then in turn, it's the same within our bodies, within our womb, because our womb goes through her own cycles. Just like we referenced the moon before and the moon cycles, we move through those cycles within our womb throughout our menstrual cycle, through that time of bleeding, of menstruation, which is connected to the new moon, the dark moon, as well as the season of winter. We can call that our inner winter. And then we move into inner spring, which is like this rebirth after we bleed, this pre-ovulatory time. Then there's inner summer, which is just like the season of summer outside. It's when we're ovulating. It's this more outward energy. And then there's also inner fall or inner autumn, when, the leaves start to change colors and fall off the trees and things get a bit more still. And there's more of a like harvest and also a bringing to completion. And that happens within our womb and our premenstrual time. And those 4 seasons that I just mentioned, literally like the seasons that are out in nature, just mapped inside our own body as our own inner seasons, those get to really be a guide, like a guiding system, an inner compass for us within our work, within our business. There's different, each one of those inner seasons that we all experience, whether we're menstruating currently or not. If you've had any surgeries on your womb, hysterectomies, if you're pregnant, if you're postpartum, breastfeeding, if you already experienced menopause and you're not menstruating, like you still with a womb space energetically get to move through those cycles. Like that is the beauty of woman, is we're like so multifaceted and so multidimensional, and all of those different facets of ourselves get to be expressed differently at different points throughout our creative work, throughout our businesses. There's times that are going to be more young, more outward, more selling and marketing and launching and getting on video and podcasts, like in your inner summer, your ovulatory time, or your inner spring, right? You're more in this like outward energy often in that time. Often. Every cycle is different. Every body is different. So we're not always going to be feeling that way, which is important to note. And then, during a time such as your premenstrual time, that's more of a time to really like start finishing things up. It's like a reflective time. Reflect on the cycle past, reflect on the work that you've done, really starting to like harvest you know, what you've grown during that cycle, starting to bring things to a close so that you can then really soften and rest and surrender into the time of your bleed, that winter time. Just like we kind of do in those seasons of year, like the leaves fall from the trees, and then we all kind of cozy up inside when it gets cold and light the fire and have lots of cups of chai and tea and all the things. It's very similar within our bodies and within our work. And that's not to say that we don't, because I also acknowledge, I was just writing about this before, I acknowledge that it's also a privilege. You know, it really is a privilege to do this and to like stop working while we're bleeding. And, you know, both of us right now, like we're both on our moon and we're recording this episode. I was doing some work things today. It doesn't mean that we just like always have to stop everything. Okay. Because I think that can be really confronting for a lot of women, and like, wait, but I have kids and I have a life and I have a job that I need to go to, or I have work that I have to do. But to really like during that time while we bleed, to menstruate consciously and to know that it is a more inward time. It is a more intuitive, softer, more yin like time where we can like factor in doing less. And if we do run our own businesses, we do have that privilege. Like we have no reason not to, even if it's just doing like 50% less or taking one day off. Like that's something that I have factored into my work and with my all my clients is like proper menstrual leave where we can all take time off. And I really look forward to the day when that's happening everywhere in all businesses and companies. Um, so then we can really rest. And then when your bleed finishes and we go into this inner spring time after your bleed, there's a refreshment, there's like a revitalization. It's that, oh, that like energy that comes after a really good rest or sleep or nap, you know? And when we factor all of that into the way we work and the way we lead, that's how we avoid burning out. You know, one of the big ways that we avoid burnout and exhaustion. And yeah, it factors in like the seasons of yang and the seasons of yin, where we expand and then we contract for a little bit, expand and we contract. And it's just the most like natural way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so why wouldn't we do that as well in the way that we create and lead and work?
Yeah, especially if, as you say, we're privileged enough to have the option to do that. And sometimes, you know, I think people imagine that womb-led business or womb-led leadership means everything has to be kind of organized on a very strict schedule around your menstrual cycle. And there can be a certain amount of you know, it can be done in a really relaxed way. Like you just said, we both acknowledged before we started recording that we happen to both be on day 2 of our bleed. Like just even having that conversation and being in a working environment, 2 women together who can acknowledge that to each other and sit in that space, sacred space together. It's already such a beautiful thing, and it's so different to the way that our society generally works. So I feel like even just those small acknowledgements, those small moments of self-reflection and holding space for one another are really beautiful and can be very powerful. And I was just thinking before, as you were speaking about the rest and the, you know, the one day rest, I don't know if you feel the same way, but what I notice with my work is often it's those days where I don't do productive things or, you know, like smash out a list of like, you know, tick all the boxes on a list of things to do, that I have some of my best ideas, that some of my most juicy, creative.
Yeah.
So it's just as important, right? Like that spacious, liminal time is just as important as the busy list ticking time.
Completely. Yeah. Like it's so, so true. And it's changing the way that we look at productivity as well. You know, like we're so wired to not see rest as productive when in that way, like there's nothing that like say you have these incredible downloads and ideas come through while you're resting, nothing can replace that. Like that can lead to this massive movement that you create, this project, this offering, this organization, like whatever it is that you put out into the world, that wouldn't have been there if you didn't have that moment of rest and really like allow yourself to drop into, just like you said, that more liminal space. And I think that rest for us as leaders, in true rest, there's actually a TED talk, I forget what it's something about like the 7 different types of rest really recommend you guys listening going to look that up. There's like all these different types of rest, and something that I actually really encourage um, friends, clients, women around me, like I do, is actually figuring out and like reflecting on what rest looks like for me in the different phases of my cycle. Because when I'm menstruating, rest looks different than what it does when I'm ovulating. You know, rest while I'm ovulating might be a good exercise or walk with a friend or like an hour long phone chat while I'm like lying in the hammock or something. Whereas rest when I'm menstruating is like a 2 hour nap and like a really good dinner and not talking to anybody, you know? So finding and reflecting on, okay, what is this rest for me in these different inner seasons? And seeing how that also shapes how you show up in your work, in your leadership, in your creativity. That's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I love that you just said not talking to anyone, because one of the things I've started to become aware of in myself as part of this kind of journey of noticing myself as a secular being is times when I feel really called to be in communication, and then other times when I feel really called to be in silence. I mean, I happen to have a really big family, so I don't often get the chance to be in silence, but I do crave it. And there are times when I have, you know, when everyone's out in the day and I work from home, and I do get those quiet windows, and it feels so nourishing for me to be in silence. And then other times when I do, I really, like exactly as you were just saying, you know, really enjoy having a long conversation with a girlfriend, or you know, a long lunch that, you know, with which is sociable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to notice how our sort of extrovert introvert dance happens in that way that reflects cycles as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Um, there's a couple of questions I just want to, there's two more questions I would love to ask you.
Yeah.
One is just to, if I can ask you to talk a little bit about what the phrase womb led really means for you, because I feel like it's one of those phrases that is kind of around a little bit in our work and in our worlds, and it probably means subtly different things to different people. But for you, what does it mean to really lead from the womb?
Mm. To lead from the womb and live a womb led life means that we're anchored in this space of our body that holds our deepest wisdom, our deepest power and potency. And that's like our center of gravity as women, our creative center, our center of pleasure, of sensuality, of play. Like to be leading, I find it very different. And this is something that I practice that I would encourage everyone to is, you know, moments throughout the day or even in the morning is to actually consciously bring your center point of focus, which is very often up in the head, in the mind, like moving forward, very much like in the front, and bringing it down and descending it down into your pelvis, into your hips, into your womb space, and noticing how you actually walk around, like physically walk around differently, how you physically like are gravitated toward different things, how you operate differently in the way you create and the way you work when we're anchored in that place. To me, living a womb led life and being womb led is like we're leading from that place descended within ourselves, from that intuitive oracle within us, not from an overly mental stimulated like up here kind of place, which it's not like we love the mind and we need to use the mind and we get to use the mind, but it's very different when, especially as womb holders, we're living and leading like from the womb. There's just a different power, softness, and like vitality that comes from that. And it's also making decisions with that space within you in mind, you know, from what you're eating to how you're moving your body to how you're tending to your emotions. It's tending to like the deepest parts of you, even in, you know, just the day to day.
I love that you use the word power, because
Mm.
it's a word that we so often associate with the masculine and with the mind, and
Yep.
to really anchor into that idea of power that's led by the womb and that's led by our femininity, it has such a different flavor and feeling to it than the kind of more patriarchal idea of power that is something that's so prevalent in our culture. Gina, the last question I'm going to ask you is about you and what is really lighting you up at the moment. And this may or may not be connected to, you know, your work and the conversation we've had so far, but what are you studying? What are you reading? What are you excited about? Like what rabbit holes are you in right now?
Oh my God, I love this question. So fun. The first thing that comes to mind for me right now is prayer. Prayer is so important for me in my life right now. It has been since I was a very young girl, but it was also something that was really um, pushed away for a long time. And over the recent couple of years, it's been really coming up and just taking more priority in my life. And my relationship with prayer and what that gets to look like for me. Yeah, sometimes it's in the morning, just like saying a silent prayer and giving gratitude and dropping in for the day, prayer through my movement. Like, can my dance and my movement be a prayer, especially while I'm bleeding, and giving my prayers back to my blood and to the earth, especially for the state that the world is in right now and the amount of suffering that's going on. Like, I feel like as women, and especially like prayer is such a feminine form of devotion that is also really misunderstood. And so for me, that's a journey that's really, yeah, really alive for me and intimate and beautiful and explorative as well. Like I'm learning, and Victoria, like we mentioned Victoria at the beginning, she's someone who I really started bringing prayer back into my life again through working with her in different ways. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm so grateful to you for your time and for your wisdom and your insights. And I'm going to make sure connected to our conversation today is the podcast that you did record with Victoria, because I think that we'll get a lot of a lot of beautiful golden nuggets from that too. Thank you so much for being here with me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.